We begin this afternoon, as we often do, by lifting stories from our members that get to the heart of the gun violence problem in our area.
My name is Judy Good, and I am from Congregation BJBE in Deerfield. I would like to tell you about the death of my friend Patty Thomas, who died at the age of 23 on July 1st, 1977. I have been telling her story for the past 35 years, and I do so in Patty's memory. The circle of people whom her death has affected grows each year. The death of one person affects so many. The night of July 1st, 1977, I was out with my two girlfriends, Patty and Carol. We had just come back from a neighborhood pub, and we were outside my apartment building when two boys walked by and yelled something at us. I became uncomfortable and told my friends that perhaps we should go to my apartment. We walked into the foyer of my building. Patty and I were next to the security door when all of a sudden the two boys burst through the door. One of them had his gun pointed directly at me. Suddenly, Patty began to scream, and the gunman turned the gun on her and shot her first in the chest, and then when she turned around, he shot her in the back. After they left, we ran to Patty, who was on the floor bleeding from her wounds. The paramedics came and worked on her, but to no avail. We cradled her, we kissed her, and we said our goodbyes. She died shortly from her wounds. Patty was not shot once, but deliberately twice, execution style, and the detectives told us that if the gunman had had more bullets, it was likely we all would have died. The shooter had 9 prior armed robberies. He was only 16. This was a senseless act of handgun street violence. No one can give Patty back her life, but we have an obligation to make a difference and work to change the gun culture. I came here today to tell my story, but I am also here as Patty's voice. Those of us here today must be the voices for the victims of the past, the present, and most importantly, the future. I have been waiting for the culture of guns and violence to change in this country. The seeds of change are growing stronger, and we don't want to lose this momentum, and it's time for us to work to make this happen. I think of the circle of people whom Patty's death has affected, and now that circle includes all of you. The death of one affects us all, and the time for change is now.
My name is Stephen Young. I'm a parishioner from St. Nicholas Parish in Evanston, Illinois. Recently, a study out of Johns Hopkins University estimated the cost of gun violence at more than $100 billion a year. But I'm not going to talk about those kind of costs today. I'm going to talk about the kind of costs you can't put a number on. This is my son, Andrew. On June 10th, 1996, he was killed by a teenager with a gun originally purchased for a convicted murderer by a straw purchaser who later went to prison for buying over 200 guns for people who couldn't pass a background check, all from the same suburban gun dealer. Andrew was 19. Andrew made a difference to this world. In his teens, he skated for the Evanston Speed Skating Club and took a liking to a younger skater. Andrew pushed him hard in practice. He watched out for him in the street, and he treated him like a little brother. That boy, Shawnee Davis, grew up to be an Olympic champion. When I got the call that Andrew had been shot, I rushed to St. Francis Hospital and walked into the emergency room. Andrew was on a table, naked, with a doctor pumping on his chest. I was escorted to a waiting room where eventually a surgeon came in and explained that Andrew had a huge hole in his heart and she couldn't save him. When I arrived home, over 100 kids were on our front lawn expressing their grief, crying, and raging. In the weeks and months that followed, my memory went blank. Despite multiple trips to the criminal courts for pretrial hearings, I remember almost none of it. I believe the mind shuts itself down to protect an individual from grief. My youngest son, Clinton, who was 8, would stand in the middle of the street in front of cars because he wanted to be with Andrew. Andrew's twin brother, Sam, quit school, he quit his job, and retreated to his room where he sketched for months, working out his grief. 2 of Andrew's closest friends spent time in a psych ward. Andrew's death has led me to work in gun control, where I've met many victims of gun violence. Some people get back on their feet and can get on with their lives. Some just aren't able to. Fathers can't work. Mothers stop cooking. People can't get out of bed. They stop bathing. Sometimes there are suicides. Grief can be crippling. You can't put a number on these costs. They're beyond calculation, but this we do know. We're paying an enormous price for the costs of gun violence.
My name is Mike Byer. I'm the principal of Morill Elementary, which serves 850 students in pre-kindergarten through 8th grade on Chicago's southwest side. We are a part of SWAP, the Southwest Organizing Project. This is only my second year at Morill, and I'm very proud of the improvements we have made. The school has been on academic probation for most of the previous 12 years. In my first year, we raised test scores and attendance, we instituted restorative justice practices, and we brought back sports. I'm a fairly young principal, but I've dedicated my life to improving the lives of my students. Our faculty and staff are also dedicated to giving our students the best education possible. But we face a significant obstacle, in that many of our students come to school with scars. The scars they bear are physical, psychological, and emotional. In the mere 20 months I've been the principal of Morill, I've met 2 young men, at the time both 8th graders, who graduated from Morill and went to high school only to be gunned down, slaughtered in the street. There are 7 students that I know of that are currently enrolled in my school who bear physical scars from bullets tearing through their flesh. Both years I've been principal, we've had a student walking with crutches, having suffered multiple gunshots. Last year, it was a 4th grader who had to carry a colostomy bag for several months. That's not what I remember in 4th grade. This is an elementary school. My students are children. They're not even teenagers. But the incident that I will always remember is when I heard over the radio that there were gunshots near our school. It was after school, but still in broad daylight. I went to the scene, which was just across the street from our school. Paramedics were on the porch of a house working feverishly to save a life. After they stabilized the victim, they lifted his fragile body and carried him to the ambulance. The victim was one of our students. He was 7 years old. He was in 1st grade. He had been eating ice cream on the front porch of his house in broad daylight across the street from our school, and he was nearly murdered. The child's name is Derek, and fortunately he survived, but he has missed months of school due to recovery and missed months more because he's now afraid to walk to school, which is across the street from his home. His academic ability has suffered, but he's not alone. Nearly every challenging student in our school has lost a loved one due to gun violence or has personally witnessed gun violence. The cycle of poverty is synonymous with a cycle of violence. If you don't want to pay for welfare or social services, then help stem the flow of guns to our neighborhood. We need to act now. Do it for Derek. He deserves the right to eat ice cream on his front porch and walk to school without fear. Thank you.